Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you, as always and as usual, for taking the time to check out today's live stream. So before I do get started, of course, I do want to share a few points, I guess I should say, with you guys. I do have another basically like a stream and a podcast that I'm doing on X every Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. That is free and available for you to listen to. It's almost like a podcast, so it's through X Spaces. I'll be sharing the link to that as well once I get to the end of this live stream and I get it posted, I'll be sharing that link. So know that I'm not only doing this stream every Wednesday at 12, but I'm also doing one every Thursday on X Spaces. So definitely check that out if you're interested. The topic that I discuss on there will be unique from the topic, of course, that I discuss on the live stream. So keep in mind, it's not going to be the same. It is going to be a different topic than what I discuss here today. So I do want to share that. I'm trying to really build that up as well. Also, another thing I do want to mention before we start to get going in this stream, I'm also working on likely doing TikTok live streams pretty soon because my account has grown quite a bit over the past, year or so. I've been able to get to the point to where I can actually do live streams on TikTok. So if you're not aware, on TikTok you have to get to like it's basically a certain amount of followers and views before they allow you to actually do streams on there. So it's not everybody that can do live streams on TikTok. So I'm planning on trying to utilize that and really make the most of that to broaden my audience on that platform. I do upload to TikTok daily as well as pretty much on, my other platforms. So definitely follow me on TikTok. It's at Brandon SP Fit if you haven't followed me there. But that's something that I'm planning on doing as well and really trying to build out. So that account has slowly been growing. I'm still working on that as well. But I did want to mention that because I am able to actually do live streams on TikTok, which before I wasn't because I had to reach like a certain amount of followers and views, etc. So that's something that I'm working on. I won't say I'm starting it now, but I'm likely planning on doing that. Probably be on Tuesdays when I'll do that. So I'll let you guys know when I do get that set up. But again, when I do that live stream on there, it's going to be unique. It's not going to be the same topic. I'm going to use, of course, a different topic to discuss there. Um, Another thing too is if you haven't, definitely check out my website, which is bponlinefitness.com. There's a ton of information on there related to online fitness coaching. There's a ton of free fitness info that you can check out. I have a fitness blog I upload to every week, as well as I send out an email newsletter each and every Monday. So if you sign up to the email list, which you scroll to the bottom of my webpage, you can sign up there and put in your email. So there's a ton of information on there. Definitely check it out. But with all that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get started with this topic, which is going beyond the barbell and understanding accessory movements and why they matter. So, there's a bunch of different topics that we're going to be going over today as we go into this stream and go into this topic at hand. And I'm going to explain exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to accessory movements. So these are some of the topics we're going to be going over. There's a few other topics we'll be discussing outside of these, so just be aware that it is going to be more than these points, but these are just a few. So we're going to go over why accessory movements matter, as well as the signs of stability, bulletproofing your shoulders, lower body power without the barbell, grip work as a performance multiplier, and core training that transfers. So we're going to touch a little bit on sort of every different type of, exercise in the body or every different muscle group, I guess I should say. So we're not just going to focus on one side. We're going to get an overall viewpoint of each and every muscle and how you can add accessory movements in your workouts. So let's go ahead and get going with talking about why accessories matter. So to really understand what accessory movements is really that this is basically sort of movements and workouts that are sort of like a complement to your routine. These are exercises that are not, not like a compound workout. Like I've mentioned with compound workouts, those are workouts that are engaging multiple muscle groups. Whereas when we're talking about accessory movements, these are basically more of isolating a specific part of the body and helping to, target that particular muscle that we're wanting to sort of build strength in. So what this does, what accessory movements do, is that it targets the weak points. So accessories isolate lagging muscles that hold back your big lifts. Again, we're talking more primarily on isolation movements. And again, like with compound movements, that's where we're targeting multiple muscle groups. So we're not talking about compound movements when we're talking about accessory movements. So again, for example, when we're talking about compound, that's squats. We're talking about, sort of like, any kind of larger muscle group that's being engaged. So another thing too is that with accessory movements, a big thing is building stability and balance. A lot of times these types of movements are unilateral. Unilateral basically means that you're focusing on one side at a time. So to give you an example of what a unilateral workout is a unilateral workout is basically a movement, like an exercise that is focusing on isolating a single side of the body. So like if you're doing let's say a single arm row using a bench. When you're doing the roll and you're pulling the arm up, you're only focusing on one side. Whereas with your other arm, you're focusing on using that as a support mechanism as you're focusing on doing the row on the other side. And then, of course, you're alternating. So that's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about unilateral movements, is focusing on one side at a time, as well as control focused movements, improving joint health and preventing injury. So the reason why we would do exercises like unilateral movements is to help with, again, isolating that side of the body, helping to build stability in that muscle, as well as helping to sort of challenge our balance and strengthen our balance at the same time. Another thing on why accessories matter is that they increase muscle growth over time. So more time under tension and varied angles spark hypertrophy beyond just the compound lifts. These also carry over to performance. So a stronger core, grip, and supporting muscle translates to heavier, safer barbell lifts. So even though we're only isolating a particular muscle or we're trying to focus on targeting that muscle, it's still leading us to better improve form in all of our other movements and exercises at the same time. So keep that in mind that we're not only, of course, benefiting that target muscle, but we're also benefiting any of the workouts that are focusing on more compound based lifts. So the signs of stability. So why stability matters. And like I mentioned, when we're doing the row, like basically that's what I'm talking about with the single arm row is what is pictured here. That's basically how you perform it. So you see in the picture where you're using the dumbbell on one side and then you're having your arm as basically a way to stabilize yourself while focusing on that single side of the body. So why does stability matter when we're talking about, accessory movements? So stability matters because it creates a solid foundation for strength by engaging our stabilizer muscles. pretty much any exercise that you perform has a stabilizing muscle that's being worked together to help assist the main muscle in the exercise. So this improves joint integrity and reduces the risk of injury, of course. It also enhances neuromuscular coordination, allowing prime mover muscles to generate more force. So you're able to really have more control on how you're lifting the weight. So, how do accessory lifts build stability? So, like I mentioned, unilateral movements are a big part of challenging stability and balance. And again, when we're thinking of unilateral movements, we're thinking of lunges and single arm rows. The example with the lunge is, of course, with the lunge, like if you're alternating, you're of course focusing on one side at a time. A lunge is naturally a unilateral movement because we're having to focus on one leg moving forward, pulling the leg back to the starting position, and then bringing the other leg forward. So that is another example of unilateral movement. So again, this trains balance and corrects asymmetries, which if you're having any muscle imbalances when you do unilateral movements, it's going to help with balancing your body out in those muscles that you're maybe, lacking behind in. So tempo and control. So slow eccentrics and pauses reinforce stability under tension. A lot of times when you're doing more stability based movements, you are more mindful. You're basically having more of a mind muscle connection when you're doing these movements because you're having to think not only about how you're lifting the weight, but also about how you're controlling that weight and keeping that weight stable at the same time and keeping yourself stable while doing the exercise. So it's naturally going to make you think more on how you control the tempo. Another thing too is that there's different dynamic challenges that come with stability movements. For example, when you're doing cables and band-based workouts, this forces stabilizer muscles to adapt in multiple planes. When you're doing cable-based movements, naturally with those movements, you're having to really rely a lot on stability. You're having to do that because when you're using a cable machine or even resistance bands, you're having to control the weight more. And again, this is another example of sort of increasing that mind muscle connection because when you're using cable based machines, you're having sort of a constant tension as you're pulling that weight. It's different than, say, for example, when we're talking about a dumbbell and a barbell, there's a different sort of example there. Like you don't have sort of that tension that's being placed on the dumbbell and the barbell versus when we're talking about a cable machine. You're having that constant tension and that pulley being pulled as you are of course raising the weight. Whereas when we're talking about free weights and dumbbells and barbells, that weight is it's under constant, like it's constant. There's not any kind of tension, if that makes sense, that's being pulled on that weight. It's just the weight itself that you're lifting. So that's sort of what I want to sort of get across there is that, of course, when we're talking about unilateral movements, those play a big role in stability, but not only those types of exercises, cable and band based workouts can also challenge your stability as well. So it's important to include these types of workouts because, again, they're not only helping, with challenging that stability, but when you're getting into a heavier lifting and especially like with squats and deadlifts, when you're doing more of those heavy movements, you need stability. You need a certain amount of stability to be able to perform those. So when you're focusing on isolating these different, doing these isolation based exercises and stability based exercises, it naturally, you know, translates into your compound movements. So, bulletproofing your shoulders. So, moving forward, we're going to talk a little bit about sort of different muscle groups, and we're going to touch on grip as well. So, I just want to go over a few different ways that you can help to sort of balance your shoulders, help with really thinking about how to sort of add accessory movements as it relates to shoulder-based workouts. So strengthen your stabilizer muscles. Some examples of what you can include would be face pulls, external rotations, and band pull aparts. What these exercises do is they reinforce the small but vital rotator cuff muscles. So that stabilizer muscle that's being engaged with these workouts is your rotator cuff. Now, that's of course not the primary muscle that's being engaged, but it is a stabilizer muscle supporting the movement in the workout. Balancing pressing volume. So, rear delt and upper back accessories counteract heavy benching to prevent posture issues. So, again, this goes back into how it complements your compound movements. Like if you're focusing on engaging the rear delts, you're oscillating those muscles as well as the upper back with accessory based movements. It's going to help when you're benching. If you're doing like a bench press, of course, that's more of a compound lift. So even though you may be doing exercises that are targeting the rear delts and upper back, it's improving your posture when you're doing a more chest based movement or more, compound base movement, I should say. So even though, of course, we're targeting those muscles, those shoulder muscles, it's going to improve balance when we're performing those heavier lifts. Also improves mobility and control, or mobility and control, I should say. So controlled raises and rotational drills enhance range of motion while keeping joints safe. So, for example, when we're doing front raises, lateral raises, any of those types of workouts, that makes us think of how we're controlling our range of motion. It also is building our joints at the same time. Another thing, too, is that it prevents injury and boosts your performance. So, when you're targeting the shoulders and when you're oscillating the shoulders, this is making them more healthy and stable. And again, it's translating to stronger lifts and longer lifting careers and being able to, sustain lifting for a long period of time is what I'm basically saying there. So, again, when we're focusing on these oscillated movements, face pulls, external rotations, pull aparts, rear delt based, exercises, any kind of shoulder, lateral raises, front raises, all of these are oscillating the shoulders in some way. So when we focus on including these types of movements, it's going to naturally translate into how we perform the bigger lifting based movements when we're doing presses, when we're doing, any kind of movement, upper body movement that is more compound based, it's going to improve it. So grip work as a performance multiplier. So with different exercises, there's many different grips that you can perform, or that I should say you can do when you're performing workouts. So the foundation for force, strong hands and stronger lifts. Grip is the first link in every pull and press. So what this does with a lot of different workouts, you can grip in different ways. So we mainly think of a normal grip, but with different exercises, you can do so many different types of grips with deadlifts, rows, pull-ups, carries, all limited by grip before muscle strength. So with these different workouts, you're doing a certain grip. With deadlifts, you can actually do different types of grips the way, however which way you want to work, you know, do the exercise. So for example, of course, with a deadlift, normally you would do an overhand grip. That's basically what you think of when you think of a deadlift is overhand grip and you're raising the weight up. But you can also have it to where one hand is an overhand and the other is an underhand. That's actually another variation of grip that you can do with the deadlift to sort of create a different sort of challenge. Another thing too, of course, with pull-ups, you can do the underhand grip or the overhand grip. So there's different types of grips that you can do to sort of challenge yourself in different ways. Also, too, this is building, when you have control of your grip, it's building forearm strength in itself. So this leads to injury prevention. So when you have more resilient forearms and connective tissue, this reduces that strain on the elbows, wrists, and shoulders. So when you're challenging, you're trying different grips and you're focusing on grip strength, like with pull-ups, carries, anything like those types of exercises, it's helping to not only, of course, build that resilience in the forearms, but it helps also to reduce the strain in your elbows, wrists, and shoulders as well. So transferable gains can happen, of course, when you're focusing on how you control your grip in your exercise. This improves barbell work, of course, athletics, combat sports, and daily function. So different types of workouts, like I mentioned, have different grips. With rows, there's different ways that you can do rows. You have, rows that pull forward. You have rows that pull up. There's different ways and different types of grips that, you can do with so many different exercises. Another example I could give, for example, like when we're talking about, it's not mentioned here, but a workout that you could include that would have another, so it give you another example of a grip based different variation that you could do with the barbell bent over row. A lot of times with that we think of an underhand grip pulling the weight up, but you can actually change the grip and do it underhand and focus on pulling the weight up in the same way. So that kind of creates a little bit of a different challenge when you're doing underhand versus overhand for that workout as well. So of course, it's still going to engage the back itself, but it creates more of a challenge in how you perform that exercise, and it's strengthening, your forearms and your wrists. So it's not just again about, that particular exercise. It's also about how you're being able to have better grip strength, have better, strength in your forearms and shoulder muscles, wrists, and just in your arms in general. So, core training that transfers. If you've listened to anything that I've discussed in some of my previous live streams, or, any sort of discussion I've done, I mentioned core training quite often. And one of the things that I always mention about core training is that it's one of the most foundational movements. And a lot of people usually overlook core training and they don't recognize the significance that it plays in a workout routine. Core training is not just about building the abs, it is more than that. So, it is a foundation, of course, for all of your lifts. So, a strong core builds a stable spine and efficient force transfer. What a force transfer is being able to transfer movement. As you're doing workouts, you're changing movement, you're doing different movement patterns, being able to transfer your weight that you're moving is important. Anti-movement versus crunches. So resisting rotation, extension, and lateral flexion builds rear, excuse me, real world stability. So when you're doing, any kind of movement, anti sort of rotational movement, extensions, flexions, this is helping with the being able to not only improve how you move in your workouts, but also how you do different things in daily life. It translates to, overall just any kind of movement that you do day to day, any kind of functional movement. So there's an athletic carryover that comes with core training. So it leads to better sprinting, jumping, and change of direction. You have a little bit more control on how you move when you have a stronger core. It's not just about weightlifting here. It's still about how you move when you're doing, maybe cardio based movements, drills, more performance based exercises. This also helps when you're training the core. It helps with preventing injury, which protects the lower back as well as the hips and shoulders during heavy training. So when you think of the core, think of it again as your foundation. It's the foundation of your body to be able to efficiently perform all of the other movements. It plays a big role. You should always have in your routine a day where you're focusing on training the core and oscillating that muscle because it's going to not only improve, being able to strengthen your core itself, but how you move throughout other exercises as well. So keep that in mind. So posterior chain builders beyond deadlifts. So a lot of times when we think of lower body workouts, deadlifts is likely one of the movements that come into mind. And we're talking about posterior chain movements. Those are movements, of course, that are focusing a little bit on, sort of where the spine is and lower body movements, such as your lats, your hamstrings, and your glutes. So building a stronger posterior chain, again, these are glutes, hamstrings, spinal erectors, and lats, enhances power, posture, and injury resilience without relying only on deadlifts. So deadlifts are a great workout. It's a great exercise that does, of course, target the hamstrings primarily, but there are also other exercises that you can include. Hip thrusts or glute bridges can be a great option. It maximizes glute activation and also engages the hip muscles, focusing on hip extension strength. The Romanian deadlift, the RDLs, which is one of the exercises I really enjoy, is emphasizing hamstring stretch and eccentric control. So, to understand, I do, before we move on with the next exercises, to understand what a Romanian deadlift is versus a regular deadlift. So if you've seen a deadlift, of course, with the deadlift, you're focusing on basically, of course, lowering your body down, not in a squat, but in a more hinging position. And you're lowering that weight all the way down and you're dropping the weight. And then, of course, pulling the weight back up, focusing on, the hamstrings. With the RDLs, it's more of having a constant tension. That's the way I like to describe those because when you're doing a normal deadlift, you're basically dropping the weight and letting it go when it hits the bottom. You're stopping that weight and then you're coming back up. With the RDLs, it's more of a constant tension in how you do that exercise. So when you're lowering the weight towards roughly where your shins are, you're not dropping the weight, but you're raising the weight slowly back up and you're kind of keeping constant tension going. So you're not with your rep ends when you come back up. And then, of course, you lower it back down towards basically your shin level. And then you're pulling the bar back up. So the bar, you're under constant tension with RDLs versus deadlifts itself. Deadlifts, you're dropping that bar and then you're coming back up. So that's basically the difference there, if that makes sense. It's just that's the big difference between those. Deadlifts, you drop that bar when you hit the bottom. RDLs, you're keeping sort of a constant tension going through the reps. So good mornings help to build spinal erector and hamstring endurance. So good mornings are more spinal based movements. Of course, good mornings are basically kind of like a bowing based movement. Kettlebell swings, that's an exercise that is a really great exercise. This is one of the exercises that I really enjoy. It's an explosive hip hinge pattern for power and conditioning. I do this exercise every now and then in my routine, not often, but it is a good lower body and leg based workout. It is a more power and conditioning based workout, of course, because it's more explosive. It's not like, your normal weightlifting or you're having a more controlled movement. Kettlebell swings are pretty, fast paced movements. So those are examples there of, exercises that are great for oscillating the posterior chain and really helping to build that lower body outside of just alone the deadlifts themselves. So time under tension and tempo control. I've talked about time under tension and tempo, so I won't stay too long on this, but this is an important part that can really help with benefiting your accessory movements. So time under tension is basically extending muscle activation, building strength and hypertrophy. So with time under tension, we're focusing on having full control over the weight. We're focusing on intentionally thinking about how we're controlling that weight and how long we stay in each different phase of the workout. Like I've mentioned before, we go through basically three phases in our workouts, which is known as the eccentric phase, the isometric phase, and the concentric phase. So basically, you have a lowering phase, a pausing phase, and a lifting phase. Or I should say that in another way, basically, you're lifting, you're pausing, and lowering. So accessory lifts benefit from slower eccentrics. Again, keep in mind that eccentric is sort of lifting and the controlled concentric is the lowering. So how you're controlling both of those lowering and lifting phases are crucial. So a prescribed rhythm or rhythm that you could try is a 3-1-1-0. I know there's four numbers here, and like I said, usually it's always mentioned as eccentric, isometric and concentric. Usually there's three phases. But there are some times where you do have a number, like sometimes when you see tempo, it does have an additional number that is basically used as sort of another sort of pausing phase, basically. So you have basically a three lifting, a one pause, a one lowering, and then basically kind of like another pause that we'd include. So this is just an example of how you would sort of control the reps. So when you're thinking about how you perform the workout and how you have control of your tempo, this makes you more, you know, emphasize more of your mind muscle connection, being just more mindful on how you perform the workout. So this elevates stabilization demands, especially in single joint or oscillation work. So it can be very beneficial doing more, thinking of your time and attention and tempo when you're doing those more oscillation based movements. So it matters for accessories because it turns lighter weights into growth tools. So when you're doing accessory movements, a lot of times you're doing a lower weight than what you would do with a compound lift because you are focusing on one particular muscle group. You don't want to lift too heavy. You want to focus on using a weight that allows you to really have control, but also strengthen that muscle at the same time. So even though you may be doing lighter weights, it can also help to add sort of an aspect of progressive overload in there. It also improves your tendon joint resilience. So the more time you have that muscle under that tension, it's going to build strength in those tendons and joints. It also, of course, enhances mind muscle connection for weak points. You're going to, when you're doing workouts that involve more oscillation movements, you're naturally going to think more on how you're performing the workout. So it's going to translate to thinking about your mind muscle connection and things of that nature. Alrighty. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I hope that you found this helpful and valuable. I know that was a lot of information that I sort of touched on there. But if you do have questions, feel free to let me know. But this topic was just really to give you an idea on how you don't need to just focus, on those compound movements. They are great movements, like when we're talking about squats or anything like that, pressing based movements, chest press, those are great movements. But it also helps to focus on oscillating particular muscles using those accessory movements so that we can balance out our body and prevent those muscle imbalances from happening if we're just, focusing on doing compound movements. You've got to have a balance in those compound and oscillation movements, which again, oscillation, accessory movements is what I'm talking about there. So definitely check out my website, bponlinefitness.com. If you guys want to learn more about online fitness coaching, again, I'll upload the latest live stream on there today. And you can also check out my other live streams, which I upload on YouTube. This one will be uploaded there as well. So if anytime you miss the live streams, definitely check them out on my YouTube channel. It's the whole archive of those there. I am continuing to grow my YouTube channel. I think right now, I want to say I'm at 1,120 subscribers, I think is on there now. So it's growing. I'm still trying to build it up. But I'm really happy with the progress that I made on there. So definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't. I'm still working on building that and getting that, going and getting more traction there. But I'm really happy the progress on there. Again, guys, I will have a sort of stream that I'll be doing tomorrow on X, on X Spaces, where I'm going to be discussing another fitness topic. I will have that shared likely pretty soon today, at least by the end of the day, to sort of share how you can check that out. And again, I'll keep you guys updated if I do decide to begin doing those TikTok live streams. That's probably something I'm going to work on doing. I'm likely going to do those on Tuesday, but I don't have anything planned in place. But I did want to mention that that's something that I'm likely getting ready to add into my schedule. But thank you guys once again for taking the time to check this out. If you have any questions, let me know. Check out my website and feel free to reach out at any time. Um, you can schedule a one-on-one online consultation on my website as well if you want to learn about online fitness coaching. With all that being said, guys, I will see you guys next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time in the next live stream. So thank you guys once again for watching, and I will see you the next time.